Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us. I'm Eddie Childs, and I'm the Director of Corporate Marketing here at Mediagistic. And a lot of my responsibilities also involve growth and strategy for our company. And I'm joined here by Adam Smith, who's our VP of Channel Marketing. Today, we're going to cover repair, replacement, or maintenance. Which marketing strategy aligns best with consumer behavior? And this is a question we get a lot from the contractors we work with, and even a lot of sales leaders and TMs. So today we're going to dig into that and what it really means in terms of integrating this messaging into your marketing and then using it to move more boxes into the market. And just as a side note, before we get rolling, we're going to have an open question session at the very end of this. So save those questions, write them down as we go, and we'll address them here in the final segment.
Alrighty. So first and foremost, I want to give a quick background just on Mediagistic, in case anybody's not too familiar with our agency. We are a full-service advertising agency. We're based in what I usually say is sunny Tampa, Florida, but it just started pouring here. But based in Tampa, Florida, and we've been, in the HVAC space for over 20 years. I've personally worked at the agency. Actually, this month was my 20-year anniversary, and probably 95% or more of my job since I've worked here has been working with dealers, distributors, and manufacturers in HVAC. I mentioned that we're a full service agency. Sometimes people ask, what does that exactly mean? It means we do everything. So television, internet, newspaper, billboard, direct mail, radio, digital radio, streaming television, you name it, we do it. We really pride ourselves on being kind of a one-stop shop for our customers. And I think most importantly, because we do everything, we take a very unbiased approach to marketing. So you might meet with other agencies out there that specialize in social or specialize in Google, or maybe they represent a local radio station as an example. Well, you can pretty much guess what their solutions are going to be oriented on based, on where they're employed. At Mediagistic, we can offer all of those things. So our only job is to listen to our customers, evaluate independently goals, objectives, serving area, budget, and then provide recommendations. And if it is social media, great, we offer that. It might be a Google product, it might be a new website, it might be outdoor, on down the line. But we just want to help them achieve their goals so that they're our customer again in the future. As far as our webinar goes today, we'll kind of walk through the agenda. So, Eddie mentioned the title, but what if we told you that focusing on repairs can actually make you more money than focusing on the installation? Hopefully we'll prove that theory for you here today. And that's kind of the crux of what we're going to talk about. We'll start by looking into consumer behavior and why that's important with aligning your messaging around the consumer behavior. And then Eddie's going to talk about whom we should target, how to turn and prime a potential repair customer into a replacement customer. And then finally, how we can help with automation to enhance your marketing and create more opportunities for your business. And then we'll start with the installation mirage. So at least personally for me, I don't know, anybody that's in my same age bracket would probably agree. When I think of mirages, for some reason, my brain goes to Looney Tunes. And I think about the cartoon walking through the desert, and they see this beautiful, a desert oasis that's going to quench their thirst and cool them off and all of those sorts of things. Well, for purposes of this presentation today, it is not a desert oasis, it's dollar signs. And that's the mirage, is that a lot of HVAC dealers believe that going after replacement exclusively is where those dollar signs are. And we're here to tell you, throughout the course of today that there's more than meets the eye, right? So while we do encourage participation, like Eddie said, drop it in the chat. The next question I have here is meant to be rhetorical. If we ask the audience, do you want a repair lead or do you want an installation lead? We already kind of know which one most people are going to gravitate towards. But the downside to that approach is that it doesn't match the consumer's expectation and their normal purchasing journey. And that's where we need to be in alignment. So installation first approach can actually hurt your business. And you see here on the right-hand side of the screen, we did a case study a few years back with several of our customers where we altered our marketing approach, our PPC keywords, what we were putting out into the marketplace to solely focus on installation. And we saw leads drop by as much as 90% for those customers. So they were getting significantly less opportunity and ultimately lost out on potential business by taking, that kind of short-sighted approach. So from there, hopefully I've got at least some of you saying, all right, fine, I won't remove service from my strategy, but we do want to keep installs. That's definitely what we want to do, and we would be in agreement with that. There are the exception out there that are shopping and looking exclusively for replacement. Certainly we want to capture those, but we don't want to focus on those exclusively because service does drive replacement. In fact, the top contractors that we work with, they see as much as 70% of their new installs originated from a service call. So by answering that service call and being attentive to the customer, ultimately they're getting more installations as a result of that. Additionally, service also builds trust, and people don't want to be sold to. In particular, if they get the feeling that from the moment the person knocked on the door, they're going to try and sell them a new system. It's very off-putting, right? Empathy and understanding go a long way, trying to listen to the customer, understand what they're looking for, and doing the best that, the service technician can to give them that resolution. And then once there is trust and they have the belief that that service technician is listening to them and doing what they ask, if that service technician finds out that, look, this system is 15 years old, it's inefficient, it's going to cost thousands of dollars to fix, you're probably better off replacing. A homeowner is going to be much more apt to listen to that messaging, provided they've been sympathetic and listening up until that point. So once there's trust, again, they're more sympathetic and more receptive to that recommendation. And Eddie's going to talk a little bit more about how we can do that later. And then finally, service calls and maintenance help ensure that your business is more consistent throughout the year. You're riding fewer of those ebbs and flows you see that happen when you focus exclusively on a replacement cycle. So here we talked about the consumer behavior a little bit, but what drives the service first approach is that consumer behavior. Again, most people don't know that they need replacement, and they're hoping that a repair is going to fix all of their problems. Think about your own life. The last expensive replacement that you did in your life, you probably tried to have it repaired first. And that's where, most customers are. That's their mindset. That's the buyer's journey. And 76% of homeowners say they prefer repairs. Another 56% feel they lack reliable repair options. So if we look into these numbers a little bit deeper, we see that almost 8 out of 10 customers want repair. So let's give it to them, right? Or at least the option to repair their system if that's what they want. And then about half of the other segment feels their needs aren't being met. And this is a great opportunity to position your business as that sympathetic ear, as being empathetic, as trying to deliver on what the customers look for, because these figures tell us that most of them aren't getting what they want. So let's try and meet their needs first, and sales will come thereafter. Okay, I ended the last slide, meet their needs first. I'm going to begin this one with the same, meeting their needs first. Meet them where they are. I know most of the people on this call, you want new installs, but the customers want repair. And this just kind of reminds me of the old adage, if you can't beat them, join them, right? So if that's what they're looking for, join them, give them that opportunity, make them feel comfortable, build the rapport, be the expert, and the sales will follow. One of the worst things we can do is have a disjointed message in the marketplace. And that's an important part of the go-to-market, is making sure that we're aligned in our messaging and also in the way that we treat a customer. So a quick example, like I'm a golfer personally. And, one of the biggest ticket items you can buy is like a new driver in golf. So just imagine, myself, I'm online, I see an ad for golf balls, which might cost $50 a dozen or something like that. If I click on that ad and that manufacturer is just trying to sell me a new driver, I'm not going to have a good experience and I'm going to bail. The same thing happens for, homeowners in this segment, where they might click on an ad that says, hey, we're the best air conditioning company in Springfield, call us for service. And then the website has nothing but offers for a new system replacement. We need to pull that message through in everything that we do and have a cohesive advertising message, again, to meet the customers where they are. And then we consult with them, we work with them, and if there's opportunity for replacement, we're the ones that are already in the home. And for my final kind of illustration or analogy, I'll use one more, and I think this is one that everybody can relate to, is if you think about your car. Imagine going in for an oil change and that business is just trying to sell you a new car, right? How's that going to go? Probably not very well. I don't think you probably go back to that place. You're certainly not recommending it. And some of you might take your keys and leave before even getting that oil change that you came in for in the first place. It's the same reason we have to align our marketing and sales strategy with the consumer behavior. Now, if I go in for the oil change and they're more than happy to, yes, Mr. Smith, no problem. We'll get you the oil change. We'll get you in and out. And then they do an assessment and they show me that, I need new brakes or my tires have no more tread on them. I'm going to be receptive to that, but not if that's their first communication. And that's the delineating factor that we're trying to get through here today. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Eddie, and he's going to talk about how contractors implement this strategy, as well as some of the results that they've seen.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so one of the things that Adam said I think is super important is that when customers search for repair, they're not educated enough about HVAC to understand that they may need an installation, right? Like some of them may be affluent homeowners who have second systems. Maybe their house has multiple systems and they know they need to shop and price compare. But more often than not, your end consumer is not prepared from a mental kind of mindset state to want to seek a replacement or installation. That's just the consumer behavior. So the real trick here is, how do we flip service calls into installations? So the most successful contractors we've worked with use a consultative framework to flip those leads into installs. And a consultative framework is really important. It revolves around this system health report you're seeing here in the middle. But what it does is it allows your technicians not to have to sell, right? Like technicians are engineers, they're knowledgeable about their craft. They are technical people, but they're probably not comfortable trying to sell a new system to a homeowner. So what this does is it creates a consultative framework. They're able to evaluate the system, in a way, using a detailed, consistent system evaluation process. And they can come from a place of being able to speak from their strong point, which is knowledge, right? So one thing we've heard from technicians is that they don't feel it's necessarily ethical. And I actually would tend to agree with them, right? If you were to walk into a homeowner's home without taking a look at their system and you weren't seeking, they bring you into the home to do a repair and you immediately come in trying to sell them a new installation, that's not ethical. You're selling them something that they don't necessarily need, right? So what is it that they're actually attempting to do in the course of performing one of these system health reports? So, the service call happens. What we recommend is, you have a consistent system health report where things like system age and the performance will trigger the installation conversation. That's important because this is something the consumer actually needs at that point, right? There are consistent indicators for the technician when they're in the home that will allow them to have that conversation, not from a place where they're trying to sell something, but from a place where they're genuinely trying to help the consumer, right? Maybe the system, is just old. Maybe load calculations weren't performed, and maybe it's short cycling or constantly running. Whatever the case may be that's going to trigger that conversation, the technician will be able to have that much easier than if they were to walk in and have to sell it cold, right? And if they're not eligible for the install, that's when you go into nurture marketing, right? So you do the repair, and then, we're going to cover this in a minute, but there are nurture marketing motions that you can do using marketing automation and field service management software that will allow you to take that consumer who's not, opted to do an installation at the time, or maybe they weren't eligible for the install. Keep them in your marketing ecosystem, ensure customer lifetime value, and eventually that will result in a replacement as well. So this system health report is important for another reason, because it's replicable. right? So what do I mean by replicable? It means you can do it the same way, relatively speaking, and expect, a consistent result that you can replicate over and over and over again. So if you put this into place, this is the formula for success in terms of turning these service to installation conversations into service calls. And at the end of the day, it helps to build higher customer trust, which will also result in better long-term retention for those customers. We're going to cover here in a second a case study with one of our customers where we were able to do just that, and I'll show you kind of hear it from their mouth. So we did this with Met's Air Control out of California, and we implemented it. We worked with our partners, HVAC Coach Pro. We implemented a simple shift in strategy that led to massive revenue gains. So first and foremost, we were able to see an 83.2% increase in service ticket averages, which means they were able to take more advantage of that service intent in their marketplace. A 58% increase in turnover rate. So that's important because that means that, something like 58% of their service conversations were actually installs, right? Those were installs where those are situations where the technician was in the home servicing the system, and by implementing the system, they actually were able to convert those more often into a new replacement opportunity. And they did it in an ethical way by following what is useful to the homeowner, what is genuinely the need of the homeowner in this situation, using a detailed system health report. We also saw a 36.5% increase in book calls. We did that because in tandem with putting this into place, we implemented some marketing pieces to help fill their funnel and drive more demand for them. And then ultimately, we saw an 83% increase in the tech-generated lead close rate. That's HVAC Coach Pro's term. You'll hear it in the case study that we're about to hear. A tech-generated lead is simply a service to installation lead done using a systematic approach. Now, I'll shut up and you guys can hear it directly from the customers and some of the people who worked on the account.
Working with Mediagistics and HVAC Pro has literally opened our eyes to so much more potential our business has.
I would categorize our relationship between Met's Mediagistic and HVAC Coach Pro one of collaboration. It's very synergistic. HVAC Coach Pro's team works with Met's from a operational standpoint and identifying kind of key areas for improvement. And so partnering with them and Mediagistic, we're able to collaborate on strategies and making sure we're providing the best strategies and continuing that and growing and helping them with their lead generation and their branding so that they can continue to grow as a business.
All three of us work together, both on the operational side and the marketing side, to help grow their business as a whole and provide them the best performance possible, and it truly has worked.
Now, when I first started working with Mets, the main challenge they had in front of them was it was not a process-driven business, and it wasn't ran by metrics. It was ran more by gut instinct and less with KPIs, key performance indicators, and metrics than we would like to see used.
The value that I got out of it as a business owner was that having Mediagistics for the last 6 years and be able to build a relationship with their team and also with Cara, and being able to have her get me HVAC Pro Jason, honestly, it's life-changing.
We were kind of all over the place, and I feel like we're in a much better place.
I agree. I think the structure was the best thing. Us just knowing more about our own business, things that we never really took time to look into, and then taking that knowledge and doing something with it, and I think that's what helped us grow.
After collaborating with Mets and HVAC Coach Pro and Mediagistic, we've seen an overall increase in performance, specifically within their conversions and their brand searches. So, from a conversion perspective, specifically within Google Ads, we've seen over an 80% increase in conversions, and from a brand perspective, we're seeing an increase in overall brand searches, which has increased by over 50% year over year.
And from a net profit standpoint, they went from from a lower net profit to between 10 and 15% net profit. They grew over 30% this past year. And last year, they actually achieved their very first $1 million month. So that was very exciting to see, and we were very happy for
Our
them.
month, which was incredible. We tried to hit that since me and Brian took the company over 6, 7 years ago.
From where we were at to where we got to later into the year was just I don't think we could have ever imagined it to get to that numbers.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with us on the technical part. But so we were able to produce really amplified results for this client by both helping them tighten up their operations, how they were taking in a service call and turning it into an installation, and then amplifying that by increasing, certain brand and intent-based search activities and using marketing channels to amplify that. So that was very successful for them. So, okay, so we're going to quickly go through what we call the service installation playbook. First and foremost, you're going to prioritize service calls in your marketing. This lines up with existing demand, and it makes a lot of sense based off what we just said earlier, is that consumers are not educated enough to know that they need installations, right? So by prioritizing those service calls in your marketing, you can take the most advantage of the actual demand that's existing in your marketplace. Now, please don't hear what we're not saying here, and that is, what we're not saying is completely remove installation first marketing efforts from your marketing motions, right? Like, installation first marketing is important. There are consumers out there searching for installations. Again, there's a certain mindset, and more affluent homeowner they tend to be, or maybe budget conscious, who are willing to forego maybe discomfort or the time and need to go shop competitors. Maybe they've got multiple systems in their house, but many consumers are not in that mindset, and they are in a service call first time and need mentality. So understanding that and creating a marketing presence that really takes advantage of that piece of consumer behavior is very, very important. Next step, train techs to identify replacement opportunities. Now, your techs don't have to be the ones to actually close all the sales here, right? Like, I know we work with a lot of companies who have a sales team, they have comfort advisors, etc. You get them in the home, they're very effective at closing that sale. But what we're saying here is that training your techs, particularly using that system health report, is going to help them key up those opportunities for your sales team, right? And they're coming from a consultative place. They're talking to the consumer about why they don't recommend a repair, for example. And again, we're doing this in an ethical way because the consumer actually needs an installation, not a repair, and it's not a Band-Aid. That builds trust with consumers, right? And that does that before a new system is ever pitched, and before either the tech or the consumer actually have to sit down and have that kitchen table conversation. The next step is a follow-up after repairs for future replacement discussion. So if you didn't, create an installation opportunity at that time of need during that repair, creating a consistent follow-up method, both through your marketing efforts, which we'll cover some channel-based marketing things you can do here in a minute, and then also from your CSRs and sales team, checking in after repair to talk about, we want to check in and see how your system's holding up, etc. That can help to create more opportunities for future replacement discussions. And finally, aligning your offers, your messaging, and your tech stack with that consumer behavior is just key across the entire installation playbook that we're discussing here. Okay, next step. Step one is targeting the right consumer. So first off, who are the best repair to replacement candidates? This is an important question because it really boils down to, in many ways, capturing the right data in your field service management software, right? So using your field service management software and your service history are both very important pieces to creating a data-driven targeting strategy. And when I say that, the first thing that I recommend that contractors do is start capturing the age of system and the age of home. You can do that in a number of ways. You can do that at many points in the consumer journey. You can have your CSRs capture that during the phone call. when you're intaking, a potential prospect and working on booking a call, you can have the technician note that at the time of the repair and capture that in your FSM that way. But if you're able to capture that data point, it's a very important data point to capture if you're going to create marketing automation motions, because knowing the age of the system, the age of the home, and the service history are your three levers that you can use in order to create richer marketing motions around taking, somebody who, was in market for repair and turning them into a service call. Customers with older units obviously are the best prospects. And then finally, people with repeat repairs are prime replacement opportunities as well, right? Maybe the system wasn't right sized for their home, the load calculations weren't performed, it's short cycling, it's constantly running, whatever the case. Those indicators can be a huge tee up for a replacement opportunity. Step 2. So training the tech to identify sales signals. Again, we're not necessarily saying that technicians have to be your sales team, although some companies I've met have done a very effective job at turning their techs into the sales team. But the key to doing this, again, is training them to educate, not just to fix. Bringing them when they're in the home and they spot a system that really should use an installation, if they're comfortable speaking from a place of knowledge, right? This is their core competency and they are knowledgeable. I would consider them subject matter experts. Many of the techs I've met, having them, educating and not just fixing is a huge piece, right? So spotting the signs of system failure and then equipping them with financing and warranty knowledge, right? Because they can be the first line, whether you have a sales team and comfort advisors or not, they can be the first line with the consumer before that kitchen table conversation ever occurs, even if they're not going to be the ones to have the kitchen table conversation. Having them equipped with that financing knowledge and warranty knowledge can help, overcome a consumer's concerns when they receive the news, hey, look, I'm sorry, but your system really is not, recommended to do a repair on. We recommend a replacement. So they can mention, hey, we have financing options. We, have extended warranties. These things can help the consumer realize, like, look, it's not going to be as big of a financial burden as you might think. And then just as importantly, you're not going to keep experiencing these problems. You're not going to have to keep calling us to come out here, and it's all covered under warranty. And then again, and the right script makes a difference in terms of those conversion rates. Now, we're not saying you need to script every single interaction for your techs. They're probably not going to perform very well if it's like you're basically putting on like the high school play or something with a script. But what you want to do is get them comfortable with those talk tracks and get them comfortable with having that conversation with the consumer so that they're able to, consult them in a meaningful way and help them. And that's going to turn your techs into trusted advisors. Step 3, the follow-up process. So again, creating a consistent, replicable framework to evaluate system age and performance during service calls is crucial, right? That's what we're really talking about here. Tracking that data in your field service management system and following up after every repair with, how is your system holding up? Using maintenance agreements to build long-term trust. And then email and SMS reminders, if done correctly, can be non-intrusive touch points. And creating that follow-up process can really take, your system for, flipping service calls in the repair, service calls in the installations and make it much more effective. And it's going to help you convert those past repairs into future replacements. Maintenance plans. So maintenance plans matter, and they are a source of ARR for contractors, but I would say they're your number one customer retention tool, right? Positions your business as a trusted HVAC partner, particularly if you have priority service built into your maintenance plans. The best maintenance customers become future install customers. So again, having that priority service is useful. Having a higher customer lifetime value is generally associated with having customers on your maintenance plans, and then it also keeps your brand top of mind for replacements. And this is something that we hear a lot. When a customer converts from like a branded search, that customer is already in my database. Well, it probably wouldn't surprise you to realize that that same name might be in the database of the guy down the street, unless they're on a maintenance plan. So it's your number one retention tool, and it's your number one way of keeping them in the loop and taking full advantage of their lifetime value, which Adam will talk about a little more here in a minute. Finally, marketing your maintenance plan. So we'll talk about channels here in a minute, but first and foremost, you want to promote maintenance as a VIP service. So make sure that your maintenance plan has those features that the consumer will see as VIP service. Educate consumers on cost savings and efficiency. So again, consumers don't like to be sold to, but if you're able to educate them on what is the cost of ownership, and then what are the cost savings during the lifetime of a system, and how can you extend the lifespan of your system, that's a much more effective message than just, kind of treating them transactionally. Next, use a RAP model. So, if you guys are interested in doing this, you have outbound, any kind of outbound aspect to your business. Our CRO here at Mediagistic loves the RAP model, which is retain, acquire, develop, and prospect. He'd be happy to talk to any one of you following this call about how to implement it in your business. He'd work you through the model, and it's like his favorite thing to talk about. So we would love to say, if anybody's interested in learning more about the RAP model, we would more than love to set you up for some personal time with our CRO. He's worked at Dell Computers and things like that, so he has a lot of experience at implementing this model across a variety of industries. Offer incentives for long-term agreements, right? If somebody is willing to enter a multi-year maintenance agreement, those incentives can be crucial in terms of getting them signed up and keeping them in your marketing ecosystem for a really long time. And then finally, market through email, social, display, and direct mail, right? Make sure that your marketing ecosystem is not just covering new business acquisition, but that it has retention motions, and then again, repair to install conversion motions built into it as well. Okay, and finally, I'm going to walk you through some channels and tactics, and then I'll hand it back over to Adam. So first and foremost, email and SMS are very, very useful for creating personalized follow-ups, particularly, again, if you're doing some of those things that I've mentioned where you're capturing those data points in your field service management system, where you know what the age of the system is, you know the age of the home, you know how frequent the repair history has been. Doing that allows you to create all kinds of marketing messaging to your database, which if you ask any contractor, I would challenge pretty much any contractor to tell me that they're using their field service management system 100%. I've encountered very few businesses that are actually doing full utilization of their CRM. It's very, very common. And it's your number one asset that you're sitting on as a business, as an owned asset, that most businesses are not utilizing fully, and many businesses aren't even taking advantage of it at all. And email and SMS can help you to more fully take advantage of your database. Google paid search and LSAs, those are going to help you capture high intent searches related to repair, right? Because the whole journey starts with repair. So concentrating on the keywords that are going to perform, having a curated negative keyword list for your paid search that's going to make sure that you don't show up for things like car air conditioning repair, things like that, but allowing you to focus on keyword volume in your market. It's going to be the highest for repairs, we've already discussed, and then using those things to drive more and more intent to interact with your brand. That's key. In-person tech conversation. So again, whether you have a sales team or not, your in-person tech conversation is going to be your best sales channel in terms of taking those service calls, turning them into installations, right? Because as we just said, having that consultative discussion where the tech goes through a legitimate evaluation process, determines whether an actual need is there, and then tees up your salesperson, or even has that kitchen table conversation themselves, but comes from a consultative place that's ethical, right? And is truly invested in creating value for the homeowner and doing what's right for them. That can be your best sales channel, particularly if you have a repair focused marketing strategy in place. Direct mails and door hangers, we recommend targeting adjacent homes from recent jobs. That can also generate a lot of word of mouth, right? If they had a great experience with you and then you are able to amplify that you were working in the neighborhood, people are going to ask your customer, and they can become some of your best salespeople as well. And then finally, social media ads. You can reach homeowners when they need you, of course, but then retargeting your database using custom lists and lookalike audiences to build maintenance business can be a really strong play in terms of creating longer lifetime value and getting people engaged into that. Like I said before, it's your best retention tool for creating longer relationships with the consumer. But at the end of the day, make sure you automate. Do not rely on manual tactics when things like SMS, email, and ringless bypass are easy to solve with automation. Those are going to allow you to tap into your database and take full ownership over your biggest asset as a business. Adam.
Okay, so Eddie talked about customer lifetime value. The more touch points you're able to have with your customers, the more trust you're able to build and the more opportunities you're able to create from that. And think about it in terms like this, are you looking for a one and done, or do you want a partnership? And also, what does the homeowner want? Do they want somebody to come in and sell them something and never hear from them again? Or do they want somebody that they feel like is going to take care of them throughout the life cycle of their new system? Or even, if they just moved into the home and the system's already 8 years old, is somebody going to handhold them until that system can no longer run? And if they do a good job of that, likely they'll be the one that they consult for a replacement as well. You look at the customer lifetime value. Maintenance customers are 4 times more likely to buy a new system from that business than just anybody off the street. So it has a direct impact on sales, the way that you treat a customer over the long term versus just that short-sightedness. I'll give you another example here, another story of a company that does a tremendous job of this. And an industry as a whole, as the car industry, does a really good job, but Lexus in particular. It's known in the advertising industry that Lexus, when they create television ads, they're not just creating it to attract new customers, but a lot of the messaging that's included in their ads is designed to make existing Lexus customers feel good about a purchase that they already made. They're constantly trying to reassure them that, hey, you made a good choice with our purchase, right? And they do a tremendous job when you get into their dealerships as well. They have lattes, they have snacks, which a lot of other car, dealerships do. But beyond that, they do a good job of talking to and consulting with their customers. I owned one, and I would walk in and I was greeted, by the service manager. Hey, how's everything going? How's the car driving? Is it still providing enough room for you? How are we doing on miles? Really just asking questions. And, if any of my answers lends itself to an upgrade or a new car, certainly they're going to be there to recommend it, but they weren't being pushy about it. Everything that they asked me, I felt like they were really just trying to make sure I was having the best experience with both them in their building, but also with the product that they sold me as a whole. And that's something that I think we can borrow from that industry and treat our customers the same way and homeowners the same way. Do they feel comfortable? Are they getting those regular touch points? Are they, having the dealer check in after a repair? Is everything going well? Is it performing better? Are you sleeping better than you were? All of those sorts of things. You can advise, consult, and listen to the customer. And then moving on to kind of our conclusions and next steps. First off, applying what we hope you at least learned here today and implementing them. And not everything can happen overnight, but creating a framework and a vision to do this over the next month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it may take. Making sure that you take a look at your existing marketing strategy and ensure that you're not just focused on installations, but is service a key component of that? And then the landing page that they're going to, does it reinforce that messaging? Are your service technicians listening to the homeowner and empathizing and trying to service it if they can, instead of just saying, well, it needs to be replaced? All of those touch points are important. Updating your CRM, like Eddie talked to. So having in there people that you recommended a replacement to that might have opted for service instead. Touching back with them on a regular basis, because you've already identified that they're prime for a replacement. So if you can treat them well and stay in touch with them, when that system inevitably breaks, hopefully they're going to turn to you, trusted advisor, to replace that system and, on a side note, hold the "I told you so's" when when that does happen. And then last but not least, making sure your technicians are ready for the task at hand, being able to role play with them, and then also automating as much as possible. Also, like Eddie said, anything from ringless bypass, text message, SMS, email marketing. You can even automate direct mail to an extent as well. Automating as much as possible to make sure that these touch points are happening regularly, so that again they turn to you when ultimately they do have another need.
All right, so we're going to open up the questions here in a second. Real quick, the QR code you see in front of you, if you are interested, you can take a phone out, snap it, and sign up. Sign up for a free marketing analysis. We'll take a look at your marketing presence and see maybe where the gaps are, particularly when it comes to being able to flip those service calls in the installations. Where are there things that you could be doing to help accelerate that? And then our partner HVAC Coach Pro will do an FSM strategy assessment as well. So they'll look at how you're utilizing your FSM field service management tool, whether you're using Service Titan or something else. And it's a comprehensive assessment to ensure you're fully utilizing that software. So they can do that as well. So if you're interested, fill that out, fill out the form, and then we'll get in touch with you after this session. But we'll open this up for questions now. You can drop it right there in the thing, and we'll field them as they come. And Tyreek, if you don't mind throwing us any questions that may pop up.
Yeah, I'm checking in there now. It seems like a little bit of a quiet bunch so far.
We've got one here actually. So it says, hey, the system health report you all mentioned earlier, where can we get that?
That's a great question. We can provide you with examples, and we have some guidelines that we can provide with you as well. And I think, Adam and I we're actually just both talking about this, is that having a system health report that makes sense for your business and makes sense for how you approach and talk about and assess is super important, right? Like being able to operationalize around it and making sure that you've integrated your approach and core philosophy as a business is very, very important, because this can help to drive a lot of business for you. So we don't necessarily prescribe like a cut and paste, like paint by numbers approach, but there are some examples we can provide. So same thing, if you fill out that form, we can provide that as well.
I have one more for you guys. Say, hey, we've got tech guys. You mentioned this. They're not really sales guys. What do we say to those techs that say, hey, I'm not willing to do this?
Yeah, that's a really great question too. So, I know that one of the biggest pain points in the industry right now, is having to, hiring is one of the biggest pain points in the industry, right? Like the trade skill gap is a huge one, and being able to, fill positions, backfill positions, and get people who, are knowledgeable enough to actually do the work is just a challenge for businesses in this space. And in the home services and trades in general. So one thing we've seen that's super effective is, businesses, they're able to create their own training programs, apprenticeship programs, and train people up. The obvious answer is to start building this into that training and apprenticeship program. But then on top of that, I think this goes back to what we were saying earlier, is really creating that consultative framework for the technicians. They're knowledgeable, they're subject matter experts, and making it clear to them that, look, your job is not to sell, your job is to educate. I think that can really help to drive adoption. And Adam, I think you had some thoughts about the system health report and why that's so important that you kind of like put some thought into it, right?
Yeah. I think, as it relates to the question, them not being salespeople necessarily, I think that's why, creating a very ethical framework around it, like you alluded to, Eddie, is important, and also getting their buy-in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the system health report is going to, evaluate a couple parts of their system, home efficiencies, all of these things, right? And it's going to spit out, should we recommend a repair or should we recommend a replacement? Well, before you start implementing this, don't do it in a vacuum. Say, look, if the system is this old, and it's this type of system and it's going to cost this much to repair, get the technicians buy-in is to say, what would you do if this was your mom's house or if it was your house? Would you recommend that they do the repair or that they do the replacement? And get their buy-in with the output of it. And once they start thinking about it in terms of making a true recommendation based on their expertise as opposed to selling, I think they'll feel much more comfortable with it. Now, if your output is the system's 2 years old and it's going to cost $300 to repair and we recommend a replacement, they're going to have an issue with that, right? But as long as it's built in that ethical format and they start thinking about it again in terms of what would you tell your mom, what would you tell your spouse, or what would you do? And as long as that output is the same, then I think they feel more comfortable with that approach, and it'll come across as well because they'll be right in alignment with it. So just make sure they're involved in that process and they can provide input and feedback to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're coming from a place of education and you're really focused on what's genuinely in the best interest of the homeowner, your customer. You're pretty much never going to go wrong. And then, another thing I can say is that your top employees tend to be your biggest cheerleaders in this kind of situation. They can help you drive that adoption and help to create a sort of culture within your company to where that question doesn't even really get asked. Like if you're, to Adam's point, like creating culture around this concept, that our job is come in the home and educate and create a solution that's genuinely in the consumer's best interest. And that's why we're doing this detailed system analysis. And we're not just going to walk in and put a Band-Aid on their system. We're trying to tell them what they actually really need in this kind of this moment. I'm sure there will be like objections, but I feel like they're easily solved, in a lot of ways once you kind of get that buy-in and can create that culture.
Agreed.
Two more things. So I know I mentioned the RADP model. I was serious. I was kind of making a joke at our chief revenue officer's expense a little bit, but I was serious about it. He would love to talk to anybody who would like to hear about it. Feel free to fill out the form and just put in the comments if you're interested in learning more about the RADP, and we'll set something up. And then same thing, if we have any TMs or sales leaders and you guys have maybe some contractors that you feel could benefit from this conversation, but they didn't attend this call, feel free to fill out the form anyway, and we can partner with you to get in touch with them, and maybe we can do this system analysis or the market fit analysis and FSM health report. And there's no obligation, right? We can just you can take these things and go right down to another marketer down the street. So there's no obligation or anything like that, right? We're really not unlike the formula that we're prescribing for you. We're really interested in what is genuinely the best thing to do in this scenario to help everybody in terms of growing your businesses and maximizing your revenue. Do we have any more questions, Terry? Do you see any more?
I think you just addressed one of the last ones about the RADP model. We're clear.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well done.
All right. Well, great. Thank you for joining us, everybody. And we'll be having more webinars in the future. So please keep an eye out. And we really enjoyed doing this webinar for you. So thanks for attending, and we'll talk to you next time.
Pleasure. Thank you, everybody.